I've always been the target of ridicule, but this neighbor's fixation on my mailbox brought a whole new level of inner turmoil. At first, her actions seemed like an innocent accident. Then they morphed into a relentless routine that left me both frustrated and strangely amused. Every week, there she was, colliding with and toppling my mailbox, forcing me to decide whether to endure it or retaliate. Part of me wanted to let it pass, while another part, ignited by anger and a hint of defiance, insisted that if she was hell-bent on destroying my mail, she'd have to face something that wouldn't give in. I remember the conflicted satisfaction on my friend's face when she saw the new model, a victory laced with guilt. If someone a year ago had told me I'd find myself locked in a bizarre battle over a mere mailbox, I would have brushed it off as ridiculous. And yet, here I am, recounting the saga of how my neighbor transformed a simple household item into a battlefield of wills. You might think I'm exaggerating, but you haven't experienced that dizzying blend of exasperation and reluctant intrigue when a piece of mail, even if it isn't yours, spends your nights in your thoughts. It all began subtly. My mailbox sat on the edge of my property, much like any other in the neighborhood. Yet for reasons known only to fate and perhaps Karen's inflated sense of propriety, it seemed to offend her in a way I couldn't understand. The first time I noticed something amiss, the box was just a bit crooked, a small, dismissible mishap, perhaps swayed by the wind or the playful meddling of a child. But then it happened again, and just as I began to doubt myself, proof fell into my lap. I had installed a security camera in front of my house, initially to deter the recent spate of thefts, not because I anticipated such an absurd drama. On the very first night of recording, as I reviewed the images, my heart both sank and raced. There was Karen in the dead of night wielding a flashlight and kicking my mailbox with such force it defied logic. There she was, a middle-aged woman in a flowery robe, stamping on my mailbox as if she were waging a grand rebellion for some lost cause. For a fleeting moment, I was frozen in shock, and then I couldn't help but laugh, even as a part of me wondered if I was losing my composure. Most would have called the police or confronted her immediately, but I found myself torn. A wild mix of anger, disbelief, and a perverse curiosity left me waiting to see just how far this absurdity would go. So I silently reset the mailbox the next day and watched. The following night, she returned. This time she didn't kick it. She simply shoved it aside with her bare hands and walked away as if nothing unusual had occurred. In that moment, I felt a growing inner conflict. A pull between the desire to play along with this farcical war and the nagging sense that something had to give. If Karen was intent on turning my mailbox into a front line, then I resolved, with a heavy dose of mixed emotions, that I would meet her challenge head-on, albeit with a reluctant flair. Over the years, I'd learned that some battles, even the absurd ones, are fought because neither party can concede defeat. Karen had become the queen of a war that was both ludicrous and deeply personal. Watching the recordings, her relentless kicking, shoving, and that one particularly surreal moment when she tried to tear my mailbox apart with her bare hands, I realized that this wasn't just about mail anymore. It was a symbol of the strange, conflicted human drama between us. And though a part of me despised the madness, another part couldn't help but participate, caught in the tangled web of my own conflicted desire for resolution. I researched for a few days trying to find the ultimate solution. I thought about concrete. I thought about reinforced steel. I even thought about installing a shock system, but then I remembered that I liked my freedom and didn't want to be sued. Then I found the perfect answer. Titanium. Does it sound like overkill? Yes, but I was past the point of caring. I made a few calls and found a locksmith who could do the job. I ordered a pure titanium post and a mailbox resistant to impact, corrosion, and, of course, crazy neighbors. If she wanted to kick something, let her kick that. The next morning, Karen drove past my house while I was supervising the installation. She stopped in the middle of the sidewalk and stared at me. Her face was a mixture of shock and sheer indignation. I could almost hear the voice in her head saying, "What's that idiot up to now?" I pretended not to notice her and continued my work. The locksmith installed the structure on the ground with reinforced concrete, ensuring that the mailbox wouldn't come out of there even with an explosion. Once the job was done, I stood there appreciating my masterpiece. It was beautiful, brilliant, indestructible, but the best thing of all, now it was her turn to act and I was waiting. The next evening, I prepared my coffee, sat comfortably on the sofa, and opened the security camera app. I already knew she wouldn't resist, and I was right. Around 2 in the morning, here came Karen. Flowery robe, flashlight in hand, the same look as someone about to commit a crime. She approached, eyed the mailbox as if she were about to face a monster. She looked around, making sure no one was watching, and then the blow came. I saw it in slow motion. She lifted her foot with all the force in the world and kicked. And my friend, what happened next was pure poetry. The impact was so violent that she was practically thrown backward. Karen lost her balance, stumbled, and fell, sitting in the middle of the sidewalk, holding her foot with both hands. The lantern rolled away. She lay there, writhing in pain, muttering swear words that would have made even a sailor blush. I watched, sipping my coffee, smiling like someone who has just seen the best episode of a series. She stood up with difficulty, limping. She looked at the mailbox as if hoping that this time she had managed to destroy it, but there it was. Impeccable, immovable, untouched. Karen had lost, and for the first time she knew it. If I thought the mailbox war was going to end there, I was wrong. Karen was too stubborn to accept a simple defeat. She could have walked out of there, swallowed her pride, and got on with her life, but no. This woman didn't know how to lose, and like any good villain who has been dealt a heavy blow, she decided to double down. The problem was that now she was limping. The next morning, I went out to get the newspaper and right away saw the most wonderful scene in the world. Karen sitting on a bench on the balcony with a bag of ice on her foot. Yes, the woman who had tried to destroy my mailbox in the dead of night was now sitting there with her face closed, recovering from her own stupidity. If it had been anyone else, I might have worried, but after months of this woman making my life hell, all I could feel was a joy that's hard to describe. She pretended not to see me, but you could feel the hatred radiating from her. The whole neighborhood knew she had done something, but the best was yet to come. In the late afternoon, while I was washing my truck, I saw a different car pull up in front of her house, a shiny black sedan with a license plate that I immediately recognized. Lawyers. Now things were getting interesting. I already knew she was going to try some desperate move, but I had no idea it would be so pathetic. The next day, an official notice arrived in my mail. She was suing me. Yes, she was accusing me of intentionally installing a dangerous structure to cause harm to third parties. I couldn't believe what I was reading. The woman had spent months destroying my property, kicked over a titanium pole of her own free will, and now she wanted to make me pay for it. I laughed so hard I had to sit down. But that's okay. If she wanted to play that game, then I was going to play it. The day of the hearing arrived. We went to the local courthouse and Karen showed up with her foot bandaged, limping dramatically as if she had been the victim of a heinous crime. She walked in with a pompous lawyer, the kind who talks tough to sound smart. Me? I went alone because, in all honesty, I didn't need any help to beat this clown show. The session began, and the judge asked her lawyer to present the case. The speech was Oscar-worthy. My client suffered serious injuries due to a malicious act by the defendant. You installed a highly resistant structure knowing that it could cause damage, and you didn't put up any warnings about the risk. Oh, right, now I was an evil villain who went around installing murderous letterboxes. The judge looked at me. Sir, how do you respond to these charges? I crossed my arms and smiled. Your Honor, my neighbor destroyed 3 of my mailboxes before that. I just wanted to make sure this one didn't get knocked over too. The judge frowned. Do you have proof of that? Oh, yes, I did. I took the USB stick out of my pocket, handed it to the officer, and waited while they played the video. And then the whole room watched Karen kick my mailbox like a soccer ball. The judge stopped the video at the exact moment of impact. You could see her leg bending backward and the look of pure pain on her face as she realized what a mistake she had made. The silence in the courtroom was beautiful. Her lawyer choked on her own argument. The judge sighed and took off his glasses, no longer patient. Madam, did you kick the structure of your own free will? She stammered. I didn't know it was so hard. The judge wiped his hands across his face. Case dismissed. Next case. And that's how Karen lost for the second time. But my friend, it wasn't over yet. If Karen had a shred of dignity, she would have accepted the judge's decision and got on with her life. But as I had already learned, this woman didn't know how to lose. She left the courtroom furious, limping, huffing, muttering words that could not be repeated in public. Her foot was still bandaged, but honestly, it was her ego that was hurting. And if I thought she was going to give up after a public humiliation in front of the judge, I was sorely mistaken, because Karen wasn't going to rest until she tried to finish me off somehow. The problem this time? She really screwed herself. A few days after the hearing, the rumors started. Neighbors told me that she was trying to gather signatures so that I would be forced to remove my mailbox. Yes, after losing in court, her new strategy was to try to get the whole neighborhood to turn against me. And as always, the reason she used was completely ridiculous. The presence of this mailbox poses an imminent risk to the children in the neighborhood. Yes, now apparently my mailbox was a danger to public safety. The detail? There were no children in the neighborhood. The condominium was made up almost entirely of elderly people and couples without children. The closest thing we had to a child was an elderly Labrador called Max who slept all day. In other words, her excuse didn't make any sense. But Karen didn't care about logic. She wanted to hit me anyway. Only this time, it backfired. After years of making her neighbors' lives hell with absurd rules, bogus fines, and a ridiculous obsession with the neighborhood aesthetic standard, no one was on her side anymore. When she started circulating the petition, people reacted immediately. The first lady she approached simply shut the door in her face. The second neighbor laughed and said, "Karen, for God's sake, shut up." And the best thing? Someone with a lot of petulance worthy of applause took her petition, went door to door, and turned it into the exact opposite. Yes, instead of a request to remove my mailbox, it became an official document asking to remove Karen from the neighborhood, and it was an absolute success. Within 3 days, the petition already had far more signatures than necessary. And now the neighborhood had a new goal: getting rid of Karen. The condominium had clear rules. If a resident became a recurring problem and the board voted against them, they could be removed from the neighborhood. And after years of abuse, the neighbors finally banded together to put an end to her era of terror. At the end of the week, I received an email from the community council. An emergency meeting had been arranged, and to my surprise, the subject was Karen. On the day of the meeting, the community hall was packed. Everyone wanted to see the tyrant fall. Karen walked in with her usual poise, trying to look like she wasn't worried, but you could see in her eyes that she knew she was lost. The leader of the board stood up, cleared his throat, and announced, "The HOA has received multiple formal complaints about Ms. Karen's conduct. In light of this, we are putting her removal from the neighborhood to a vote." Karen went white. She tried to argue, blame me, tried to say it was all a conspiracy, but no one else cared what she had to say. The vote took place, and the result was unanimous. Karen was officially expelled from the neighborhood, and when the decision was announced, I saw something I never thought I'd see. The whole neighborhood applauding. She had 30 days to sell the house and get out of there. And my friend, it was a wonderful month. The neighbors celebrated. People who barely spoke to each other began to unite, laughing at the fall of the queen of tyranny. And what about me? Oh, I enjoyed every second of it. I made a point of stopping in front of her house every day, saying hello with a smile. Little by little, the for sale sign appeared in front of the house, and then one fine day, Karen disappeared. She was gone. Gone forever. The neighborhood was finally free, and my mailbox untouched. And if you like this video, don't forget to comment and subscribe to the channel.